In the arid heart of the Old West, where hope was a mirage and survival, a daily battle, a destitute family encounters a stranger on the brink of death. What begins as a simple act of kindness driven by compassion amidst their own misery soon reveals itself as the prelude to an unpredictable journey, intertwining destinies in ways no one could conceive and promising a change that would echo through their lives forever.
The sun scorched the dusty Texas plains of 1888, painting the sky with bronze and ochre hues. Yet, its intense light brought little warmth to the hearts of the widow Sarah O'Connell and her 2 children, whose lives were a constant struggle. Their farm, a cluster of graying planks and a fence that resembled a skeletal outline, mirrored the scarcity surrounding them. Her life was a heavy load, but compassion was a fire that never extinguished within her. Bringing a dying man into her humble cabin meant another mouth to feed, more risks in an already precarious environment, but she simply couldn't leave him there to die. With Thomas's reluctant help, they dragged the man into the cabin, an exhausting effort under the relentless sun. The central problem was stark and immediate: how to care for a man at death's door when they barely had enough for themselves. And who was this mysterious man, such an anomaly in the landscape of their poverty and despair? That fortuitous encounter promised to change everything, but they didn't yet know the price or the reward, only that a life was in their hands, and with it, the unknown. Ever since a tragic mine collapse had claimed her, husband Sarah found herself alone with Thomas, a 10-year-old, whose eyes already held the seriousness of an adult, and sweet Emily, 7, who, despite life's harshness, still found small rays of joy in wildflowers and birdsong. Hunger was a constant shadow, a gnawing presence that chipped away at their hope, and debts piled up like the dust clouds on windy days, threatening to suffocate them. Mr. Abernathy, the local foreman, a man with small, cunning eyes, hovered around their property like a vulture, uttering veiled threats of seizing the little land they had left. His presence was a daily reminder of their precarious existence, a constant burden on Sarah's already weary shoulders. It was on a muggy afternoon, when the atmosphere was as thick as the dust that rose with every step, that fate paid them an unexpected visit. Thomas and Emily were searching for dry branches for the fire in the dusty outskirts of their property, a daily chore essential for their survival. Thomas, with his sharp eyesight, spotted a figure under the sparse shadow of a solitary cactus, which appeared distorted by the intense heat. As they cautiously approached, the boy's heart pounded. It was a man, fallen and unconscious, dressed in clothes that seemed too fine for that unforgiving desert, but his face was pale, almost lifeless, and stained with blood. A nasty wound on his left leg colored the dry sand dark red, forming a small puddle that seeped into the thirsty earth. Despite the initial shock and the fear that tightened their chests, after all, strangers in those parts rarely brought good news. Thomas, driven by courage forged in adversity, ran back to call his mother. Sarah, upon seeing the stranger's grave condition, did not hesitate, despite her own burden and the difficulties plaguing her. The days that followed transformed the humble O'Connell cabin into an improvised infirmary, a silent testament to Sarah's unwavering compassion. With her limited medical knowledge, acquired through observations and makeshift remedies from a hard life, she applied all her skills with determination. She boiled water in old pots to clean the cowboy's deep wound, which seemed to worsen daily with infection. The bread, baked with what little flour they had, was divided into almost transparent slices. In moments of lucidity, he murmured a few inaudible words, dreams or memories distorted by fever. But what most caught Thomas's attention, in his silent and astute observations, was the quality of the man's clothes, worn from travel but still visibly fine, and the richly tooled leather holster at his waist, which contained a pearl-handled gun, a luxurious and unusual detail. Sarah, for her part, noticed the gold ring on his finger, with an elegant crest she didn't recognize, but which seemed to indicate a lineage or high status. These small details, like pieces of a puzzle, added a layer of mystery to the man now resting in their home, an enigma they were too busy trying to keep alive to fully unravel. With each passing day, the O'Connell's sacrifice for a stranger grew, and the hope or perhaps the fear that he might be the key to their problems or the cause of new and greater ones grew in the air, silently weaving itself into the fabric of their lives, altering it irreversibly. And the dried meat, a rare luxury, was meticulously saved for the patient's weakest moments. The worry about debts hung over them like a dark cloud, now even denser with the unexpected costs. One day, Mr. Abernathy, with his forced smile and inquisitive eyes, made one of his intimidating visits, ostensibly to check on things. His hungry gaze fell upon the stranger's horse, a bay stallion tied near the barn, a purebred mount that stood out starkly against the poor, dilapidated landscape of the farm. "Trouble, Sarah?" he asked with a voice that barely disguised his malice, as his nose sniffed a faint smell of medicine. The presence of the stranger's horse and the rumors starting to circulate in town raised suspicions, and Abernathy, sensing an opportunity to squeeze Sarah even harder, increased the pressure on her to settle her debts, threatening to confiscate what little possessions she had left before she could even catch her breath. She changed makeshift bandages, fashioned from torn, precious clean sheets, and brewed teas from wild herbs gathered by Thomas, hoping to lower the persistent fever that burned through the man's body. Each dawn, Sarah assessed his progress, or lack thereof, with growing concern, her sleep scarce and interrupted by nightmares of debts and hunger. Thomas, with the seriousness of a young guardian, helped with everything he could, carrying heavy buckets of water from the distant, while feeling his muscles ache keeping the fire lit for the teas, and observing the stranger with keen curiosity and a premonition. Emily, with her angelic innocence, sat near the man's makeshift bed, a straw cot in the coolest corner of the cabin, and murmured sweet, hopeful prayers, convinced that her pleas would aid the sick mister's recovery. Food, already scarce, became even more rationed to sustain a third member of the household. The cowboy, who had barely shown signs of life, slowly began to show small, gradual improvements. The turning point that would irrevocably change the course of the O'Connells' lives occurred a week later, on a morning when the sun, strangely, seemed gentler, bathing the cabin in a golden light. The cowboy, until then a feverish body and an incoherent murmur, opened his eyes fully. The man she had saved from death, risking what little she had and going further into debt, was from a completely different world than hers, a universe of wealth and power she could never have imagined touching. Thomas, his eyes wide with amazement, saw the possibility of a future where the fear of hunger would not be constant, a future where he could be more than a boy struggling for survival. Emily, with her innocence preserved, was simply glad that the sick mister her mother had cared for so tenderly was well, and that perhaps now they could have more bread, more toys, a lighter life. Sarah, on the other hand, accustomed to daily struggle and the pride of always having managed on her own, felt the weight of the offer's grandeur. She found herself facing the promise of a completely new life for her children, a golden opportunity to lift them out of misery. But she also felt the heavy responsibility of a decision that could change everything for better or worse forever. Arthur's offer transformed the dynamic of the humble cabin, replacing hopelessness with a fragile, yet potent, new outlook on the future, a horizon of possibilities beginning to emerge in the arid desert of their lives. Her thoughts raced. Where did this miracle come from? Was it a divine test, an unbelievable stroke of luck, or a trap in disguise? Relief, incredulity, and even a touch of fear of the unknown mingled in her heart, a swirling vortex of conflicting emotions. Arthur, sensing the overwhelming impact of his words, promised to reward Sarah and her family generously, with a seriousness that left no doubt about his intent. He offered them not only a vast sum of money enough to cover all their debts and give them a decent fresh start, but also the promise of better land for farming beyond Abernathy's reach and a respectable job for Thomas when he was older, securing a future they could never have conceived. The confusion was gone, replaced by a surprising lucidity. For the first time, he was able to speak clearly. His voice, though hoarse from weakness, carried an undeniable authority, a tone that revealed a life of command and respect. He introduced himself as Arthur Sterling, and his words struck Sarah like a bolt from the blue, shattering the monotony of her existence. He was none other than one of the wealthiest and most influential ranchers in all of Texas, owner of vast stretches of land that extended for miles, thousands of head of cattle, and an empire built with hard work and ruthless vision. He had been ambushed by a band of cattle rustlers, shot and left for dead, and his presence so far from his lands, wounded and vulnerable, was a secret he did not want to spread before he could recover and regain control. The revelation left Sarah in shock, a mixture of astonishment and disbelief etched on her face. The news, relayed to the children, brought a wave of emotions they could hardly comprehend in their entirety. News of Arthur Sterling's recovery at the humble O'Connell farm, despite efforts to keep it discreet, began to spread like wildfire across the small community, fueled by curiosity and gossip. Murmurs of surprise, envy, and speculation circulated in the general stores, saloons, and at the water wells, reaching everyone's ears. Mr. Abernathy, with his keen nose for money and opportunity, soon learned that his debtor was sheltering such an influential man. His greed ignited, and he intensified his threats, demanding immediate payment of Sarah's debts, no longer just to pressure her. He did so not only with material offers, but with genuine gratitude and profound respect for the kindness, resilience, and strength she had demonstrated in saving him. He began to share stories of his own life, of how the vastness of his wealth and success had not filled the void of his loneliness, of how ambition had often left him, with few true connections and moments of genuine happiness. The O'Connells' care, their simplicity, their family unity, and the warmth of their home had given him a new perspective on life and the true importance of family and compassion. This deeper connection between them, built on vulnerability, mutual respect, and a growing admiration, began to break down social class barriers. It deepened both their motivations, Arthur seeking a way to repay the kindness that saved not only his life, but also opened his eyes to what truly mattered, and Sarah weighing the significance of a decision that could redefine her children's lives, forever confronting her pride with the hope of a dignified and secure future, but hoping to extort some advantage from the situation, perhaps forcing Arthur to intervene more directly and profitably for him, or even to seize the gratitude of a rich man. The tension escalated when Arthur, still a bit pale and with his leg bandaged, but with his commanding presence restored, insisted on personally confronting Abernathy at the O'Connell farm's door. The idea of accepting Arthur's generosity, however much it was for her children's good, brought forth her dignity and the pride of always having managed on her own, owing nothing to anyone. She struggled internally between the urgent need to secure a safe future for Thomas and Emily and the fear of becoming dependent, of losing her independence, or of being seen as an opportunist who took advantage of a rich man's misfortune. Sleepless nights were filled with doubts and silent prayers, the weight of the future decision pressing on her soul. With a calm yet firm voice that left no room for doubt, he assured that Sarah's debts would not only be paid, but fully honored, with interest if necessary. This led to a veiled yet palpable confrontation between the two men. Abernathy, accustomed to imposing his will and intimidating the weak, felt Arthur's power and unquestionable authority and recoiled. But his small, angry eyes burned with a suppressed resentment at the unexpected interference in his petty schemes. Sarah, though relieved by Arthur's intervention, which freed her from Abernathy's clutches, felt increasingly uncomfortable with the unwanted attention the situation generated. Arthur, perceiving Sarah's hesitation and internal conflict, The remarkable strength of her character and her pride intensified his efforts to persuade her. The tension reached its boiling point on a morning when the air hung heavy with the imminence of a final decision. Arthur, now sufficiently recovered to embark on a long journey back to his vast lands, announced he was ready to depart. She felt the weight of Arthur's every word, the significance of his promise. His presence, tall and imposing, with an aura of unquestionable authority, imposed immediate silence in the yard. With a firm and unwavering stance, he confronted Abernathy, his voice low, but charged with a force that made the foreman take a step back. "This family is under my protection, Abernathy," Arthur said, his voice calm, but with an authority that brooked no argument. "All debts are paid, with interest, if that's what concerns you. And if you dare disturb them again, I swear you will bitterly regret it." The foreman's threat was finally neutralized, disarmed by Arthur's authority and unexpected protection, which hovered like a guardian angel. The incident, though terrifying, served to reinforce the urgency and wisdom of the decision Sarah needed to make. Thomas's and Emily's eyes were fixed on her, filled with silent hope, the expectation of a new life pulsing in the air, clear and strong. Sarah knew this was the decisive moment, the point of no return that would define her family's destiny. She took a deep breath, the future of all in her hands, and with a conviction that sprang from the depths of her being, a conviction forged in adversity and hope, she made her choice. It was then that Mr. Abernathy, driven by his unbridled greed and burning envy, decided to make his last and most audacious move. Believing Arthur had already departed, he appeared at the O'Connell farm, no longer with veiled threats, but with a retinue of henchmen and a legal document in hand, demanding immediate payment of the debts, with the clear and cruel intention of bringing the O'Connells to ruin and seizing their land, leaving them with nothing. The atmosphere grew thick and fraught with immediate danger. Thomas, with a courage that surpassed his young age, instinctively placed himself in front of his mother and sister, a small line protecting his pride, his eyes fixed on Abernathy. Sarah, her voice choked with indignation and fear, tried to argue, her desperate gaze searching for a way out, feeling trapped. The news brought a mix of relief for having fulfilled his part and helped, and a strange melancholy to Sarah as hard, who had grown accustomed to the rancher's presence in her humble home, to his deep voice and his unexpected counsel. Before leaving, however, he made one last, decisive offer to Sarah, one he knew would be impossible to ignore, a game-changing proposition. With a look laden with profound gratitude and a newfound desire for companionship, he said, his voice deep and sincere, "Sarah, I will not only pay all your debts and give you a large sum of money to start anew elsewhere. I want you and your children to come to my ranch, not as employees, but as part of my family. You will have a permanent home, you will have security, education, and you will never again suffer from hunger or cold. I give you my word." The proposal, laden with a mixture of gratitude, admiration, and a deep desire to fill the void in his own life, placed Sarah before the most important and transformative decision of her existence. Her children's future depended on her, and the weight of that responsibility was overwhelming. As Sarah tried to process the magnitude of the offer, her heart pounding in her chest, a sting of anxiety mingled with hope. It was at this crucial moment, at the height of despair and uncertainty, when Abernathy smiled victoriously, that Arthur Sterling, who had delayed his departure for one last sincere conversation with Sarah, intervened. Sarah's decision to accept Arthur's offer was the turning point that catapulted the O'Connells' lives into a reality they had never dared to dream of. They moved to Arthur Sterling's vast and prosperous ranch, a place of sprawling green fields that stretched to the horizon, clear rivers, and countless cattle. The rancher saw untapped potential in him, a sharp mind, and a dedicated spirit. He devoted time to teaching him about cattle, finances, land management, and the art of running a large ranch. but rather in the unbreakable bonds of humanity, the generosity of spirit, and the capacity of a heart to open to help another, unaware of the transformative and wondrous consequences such an act of pure compassion can unleash in their own lives and in the lives of others. Their legacy was not just one of material prosperity, but of a love and respect that transcended social barriers, proving that true fortune lies in human connection. Thomas absorbed every lesson eagerly, and in time, he grew into a respected man on the ranch, with a promising future, becoming Arthur's right-hand man, his heir and spirit. Emily, free from the shackles of poverty and constant worry, could finally dedicate herself to her studies and develop her innate talents, blossoming into a vibrant, joyful young woman with a curious mind, always seeking knowledge. She brought lightness and laughter to Arthur's once silent and, at times, somber home, filling it with the vivacity of her youth. The landscape of their poverty was replaced by an abundance and security that became their new and surprising routine, and the feeling of belonging to something greater than his own domains. He ceased to be the lonely, reclusive cowboy, transforming into a paternal figure for Thomas and Emily, a mentor, a confidant, and a safe harbor. In Sarah, he found not only a trustworthy partner for business, someone he deeply respected, but a loyal friend and a kindred spirit whose strength, compassion, and dignity inspired him daily. They built a life together, not out of obligation, but out of choice and mutual affection, a union forged in adversity and gratitude. The seemingly simple act of kindness from a poor widow driven by pure humanity and the impossibility of letting a human being die not only saved a life on the brink, but redefined the existences of everyone involved, weaving an intertwined destiny, where before there had only been separate solitary paths. Sarah, with her dignity intact and her industrious spirit, did not become a passive dependent. Far from it. Her sharp intelligence, remarkable organizational skills, and practical sense soon made her stand out. She took on a vital role in managing Arthur's sprawling home and, gradually, in overseeing part of the ranch's operations, demonstrating that her strength and wisdom were no less than the rancher's own. She brought order and efficiency, and her presence became indispensable. Thomas, the serious boy, flourished under Arthur's tutelage. Arthur Sterling, in turn, found in the O'Connell family what his vast wealth had never provided: companionship, human warmth. The story of the O'Connells and Arthur Sterling remained a whispered legend across the plains of the Old West, a vivid reminder that the greatest riches are not always measured in gold or material possessions,